everybody. Today I wanted to film a video with my husband, this is John, about guys' perspective on foster care. So a lot of times with women, I know that they'll usually be like, oh, I want to do foster care, and their husband's not really interested. And so I thought we would maybe film something just to maybe alleviate some of the apprehensions that guys may have, or help you just kind of come to see how we came to the conclusion to do foster care as a couple. But I mean, I will warn you, I have a really awesome husband, so it didn't take much convincing. It didn't take much convincing as far as us going into foster care. So yeah. So do you remember when I asked you about doing foster care?
No.
You don't remember?
No. I remember that first meeting we went to, like
The orientation?
the orientation. That really wasn't orientation, it was like an informational session or whatever. I remember that, and then I remember when we actually went and interviewed with the first agency we were with. But no, I don't remember. I know I'm horrible, but no, I don't remember when we first started talking about it.
Well, I mean, in our minds when we got married, like I think we had talked about adoption at least.
Yeah, that's right. So we didn't start talking about foster care. We started with adoption.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, like in the first conversation, it was kind of decided as we were doing research and everything that we didn't want to do overseas adoption, that there were plenty of kids here, which kind of led to the inevitable out of foster care instead of a private adoption.
Well, and part of it, I will be honest, part of it is like that it costs so much money to privately adopt, and in foster care, adoption through foster care is pretty much cost free. I mean, other than having the kid, like paying for their needs and that kind of thing, but you don't have to. There's not a lot of legal fees. There's not a whole lot of it's like a lot of legal fees, I think, is what goes into private adoption.
Yeah,
and
we had also talked because you were still in the Air Force at the time, and so we were both full-time military, and it was not going to be doable. Real high dollar word there. But yeah, we weren't going to be able to take on an infant through private adoption or anything like that very similarly, and we felt, not that we couldn't, but that
maternity leave is a factor.
Yeah, and we felt like our calling was more for older kids. Keeping siblings together was something we both felt strongly about.
So if I remind you, you might remember. So when we started looking into foster care, one of the people that I worked with was a foster parent, and they had 4 kids of their own, and they decided to become foster parents, and they had a little boy in their home, and the little boy had a sister, and this brother and sister were separated, and it really just broke my heart that they were separated, and that was when I kind of came home and started talking to John about it. But this was like 2 years before we decided we were going to foster, or probably just a year before we decided we were going to foster.
Yeah.
At that point, because we didn't have any kids, and so I was like, well, we could take on a couple, we could have a few, and it wouldn't be a big deal. And then we went to the orientation.
Yeah, wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah. Well, and then we went to the orientation, because that was the reason that they couldn't have his sister, was because she had been through some stuff that they weren't really willing to take on with their 4 children at home. And since we didn't have that same concern, because we don't have any children, biological children, or at the time we didn't have any children, it made sense that we would do foster care. But that was a while before I got out of the Air Force. That was like short.
We were still talking about you re-enlisting.
That was even before that. Like, it was. I think we went to the orientation in like August of 2014.
Yeah.
No, because you were in Texas then, so it had to be in August of 2015.
Okay. I was in Texas in 24. Yeah. It was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's Fiona. In case those of you haven't seen her yet, that's our beagle.
Lovely beagle.
Just wearing a sweater, trying to get comfortable.
But yeah, I will say, the orientation we went to was very scare tactic-y, I feel like. Like, they were like, hey, prepare yourselves for the worst, like, it was a lot of worst case scenarios. A lot of stories about the kids. I think partially to make sure, like, if you get into it, you're committed to it. But they left out the worst parts. And I'm not talking about kids. They ran the gambit with the kids, both in the PS Maps classes.
Yeah, they talk about all the problems. Yeah, that's true.
When you're going through the PS Maps classes, PS Maps. PS Maps.
It's PS Maps. That's the federal. I think it's federal. It's
I keep saying Maps, like like military Maps.
It's the training that's required. Every state requires that training.
So, from my perspective, they talked about the problems the kids could have, the problems of this, that, the other, and that's not to be understated. What was never told to us in the orientation we went to, when we talked to our first agency, when we went through PS Maps with yet a different agency, because they could get us through the classes faster to get licensed. Nobody talked about that most of the social workers and everything are how do I say this nicely? I don't think they have a whole lot of other options. Like, they probably started off caring, and they're overworked. I mean, I imagine it's much like, a inner city school teacher who...
Any government job, really.
Yeah, where if you had half the workload, you would be fantastic, but you can't afford to care. And some of them, because we've had, 5 now? 4, 5?
4.
We've had several social workers, several licensing specialists, or family, whatever they are, our licensing agency. They are probably well overworked. They work long hours, a lot of times to meet with families. If the family's a dual income family, they're probably going to have to be there after they get home because they have to see the kids, so they have to be out of school. So a lot of their working is with the families, is later on in the day. When you're tired from the day, they're probably tired from doing all their paperwork and government stuff. But and I don't know the caliber of all foster families, but they do not like to take your opinion seriously, even though you're with them all the time. They're very, some of them have been very, it's their way or no way.
It's kind of like, okay, well, we're glad you think that, but we're going to do whatever we feel, or not even feel, just like, we're just going to keep filling out the paperwork and going to court every time.
Yeah, so when you advocate for the kids, like, hey, or you ask the simple question of, hey, what are you doing to advocate for the kids? Because that's your job. Where's their case at? What's going on? And we've had a couple that have gotten offended by that question, like, how dare you ask me what I'm doing? Okay, well, all you did was gripe and complain and talk about how terrible it was that I asked you the question of what you're doing, and you didn't answer the question. What are you doing? Because yes, our girls have a GAL, which I know she's talked about, is their lawyer that's supposed to be advocating for them. They have the social worker was supposed to be advocating for them. And at the beginning of the case, when the girls came into our home, I don't feel like any of those people were actually advocating or doing anything for the girls. They were doing everything based on like a step process. Like it had nothing to do with the girls individually, nothing to do with what they actually needed. It was like, well, this is how the foster care system works. We got to run through this, and then we got to run through this, and this, and this. And it didn't matter if the girls got worse or better or
there was
indifferent.
No individuality to the plan.
Yeah, they kept going with it. And I understand there's some amount that they need to, but as soon as we started bringing it up, there a lot of things changed and started progressing forward, and had nothing to do with biofamily. It was all about how the state was treating the girls changed, and but we had to. Well, I say we. She pushed for that.
We pushed for it. I mean,
Yeah.
David.
I've only yelled at one social worker, by the way. Only one.
So what did you think about placement? Like when we got calls. When we got calls for him, yeah.
I think it was. You can't play that game. You know that game you play when you gotta go to dinner? And it's kind of like, well, whatever you think. That's... A placement is not the time to be doing that. Okay? Because we agreed to take a placement of one child, and we were told it was going to be for a period of 30 days max. We now have a sibling to that child, and it has been over a year. So you can't. I mean, we kind of agreed that any placement that came into our house, if they could stay, they would stay for however long they needed to, including forever.
Yeah, if they had nowhere else to go.
Yes, if they needed to stay, they would stay. And so, yeah, when the first call we got was like a matter of hours after we got licensed.
No, it wasn't. Our license wasn't even done yet.
No, it wasn't done, but it had come back to where it was just like
it was waiting for a signature.
Yeah, so we were licensed. It just needed to be like signed, processed, and it was done. But we were licensed. And after that notification that we were going to get licensed, it was just, awaiting that last signature. We got a call within a couple hours. And, the girl, it was a girl, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything. What I remember is that she had a problem with starting fires and animal cruelty. Which we probably could have handled if we didn't have 5 animals, right? Well, we only had 4 at the time.
Yeah. But no, that wasn't a fit for us.
That's not, and that's not, I mean, you have to be realistic, because you don't know how you would react when you have somebody else's kid in your home, and then you walk in the kitchen, you're preparing dinner, you come back out to the living room, and they're doing something, and you don't want to get yourself in trouble, and if you're not the placement for them, they're not being served the best either. And so, I know that sounds like a terrible, justification, but if that's what you need in your mind, you need, not wait for that perfect placement, don't child shop, but at the same time, you have to know
set your boundaries,
what you're up for. Like us in particular, we were very open that we couldn't take a child of Muslim faith because
we couldn't support
I know, I know it's, but you're expected, if you have a child, that you will take them to their services if necessary and allow them to
you'll support
their
culture.
Religion and culture, and there's no way I know it wouldn't be the child's fault, but I don't even know how we would do that. It'd be hard to take a Jewish child, to be completely honest with you, because I wouldn't know how to do that.
Any other faith, if they were committed to another religion, we weren't going to be able to do that, just because that's not going to, we're not going to put that in our home, if that makes sense. We're not going to allow the worship of another God in our house.
Yeah.
And rightly so, like, because you're supposed to, the goal is for them to go home. So you're supposed to keep them in a state where when they go home, it's not like this culture shock shift situation in the best sense of the word. And I mean, there be other people that will take children just for whatever reason, but John and I intended to parent them, not to glorified babysit them. And in foster care, that can happen sometimes. I would even go so far as to say that's what previous placement for our girls did. They met their physical needs, and
I bet you could hire some 16-year-old and she'd have taken better emotional care of them.
Yeah.
But.
So that's where we were from that standpoint of just like Mormon or Catholic, or which is hard to say. Like, it's one thing if they're just like their parents say they're a religion but they're not like practicing, like they're not practicing Catholic, or they're not, like, it's not going to be
Catholicism.
Well, yeah, but
practicing. Oh, if they're practicing Catholic.
Yeah.
Okay.
That wouldn't be really a problem, I don't think, but just the, like, if they were like committed to another faith, and we wouldn't be able to deal with that. Our girls now, their mom doesn't really have like a specific faith, so it's not difficult for like, she doesn't mind us taking them to church, and she doesn't mind us, having them practice Christianity, so that works out for us.
Yeah, and that's not the only thing to take into consideration. Cultural things, and we not to let on what culture we're respecting or keeping ingrained in them, but we are, through different means, whether it's room decorations or certain foods that we get from time to time or have learned how to make here.
Or extracurriculars.
Yeah.
That they do.
Field trips, things we go to, where they experience
their culture.
Their culture. Our first ones are still here, so we're preparing for, yes, what if they go home, but we're also still preparing, this is our first placement, what if they don't go home?
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting state to be in, to be completely honest with you, is just, it weighs on our hearts because we don't know whether they're going home or staying here. And so I doubt they think about it as often as we do, especially our younger one. But I mean, they have to sometimes they have to. So.
Well, do you want to talk about anything else, or?
So we'll probably wrap that up there. I think we're gonna make a few more videos together.